Penguin Random House presents Awakening Bharatmata, The Political Beliefs of the Indian Right, written by Swapan Dasgupta, read by Vikrant Chaturvedi. Preface. In 1991, The Economist report on India's general election was curiously entitled, "The Winner Came Second." The reference was to the Bharatiya Janata Party, BJP, which emerged as the main opposition to the Congress after a spirited campaign that centered on the demand to build a temple at the birthplace of Lord Ram, the central figure of the Hindu epic Ramayana, on the site of a 16th century mosque in the town of Ayodhya. It was the Ayodhya campaign that set the terms of a political discourse that has persisted in one form or another till today. Ostensibly, the demand was for a grand temple to be built on a site where an ancient Hindu temple had apparently once been demolished by invaders. In reality, the temple movement was a metaphor for larger questions on Indian nationhood, questions that had only been partially resolved after independence in 1947. It is not that these issues hadn't been addressed earlier during the struggle for freedom from British rule. The Ayodhya movement, invoking the historicity and sacredness of Lord Ram, rekindled some of those debates and, more importantly, gave them a popular connect. The 1991 general election, preceded by spectacular mobilization in northern and western India, was Hindu nationalism, hitherto considered a relatively marginal phenomenon in Indian politics, coming of age. On 6th December 1992, the disputed Babri Masjid was razed to the ground by a huge gathering that perceived the shrine as a symbol of national humiliation and shame. It was one of the defining moments of post-independence India. The emergence of the BJP was much more than an ordinary electoral phenomenon. It forced Indians to choose between two contrasting views of nationhood. On one hand, there were those who saw modern India in terms of secular republicanism, while on the other, those who sought to blend technological modernity with the country's Hindu inheritance. The BJP's rise and the debates that accompanied the phenomenon anticipated many of the concerns that find reflection today in the United States and Europe. The rise of Hindu nationalism was also a profound intellectual challenge to the loose left liberal consensus that had prevailed in India since Jawaharlal Nehru became Prime Minister in 1947. In 2014, after Narendra Modi won for the BJP a majority on its own, the challenge became sharper as larger sections of the old establishment lost their preeminence and positions of authority. Consequently, there were accusations that the face of India was being changed unrecognizably by an assertive Hindutva movement. Since the Ayodhya movement began, both the idea of Hindutva and the political character of the BJP have been scrutinized by scholars, usually with skepticism and even outright hostility. Consequently, there has been an inclination to view India's right-wing politics as either a variant of fascism or merely a collection of sectarian prejudices. The centers of intellectual power, notably academia and the media, have been particularly hostile to the BJP and those identified with it, an opposition that varies between condescension and shrill disavowal. The inspiration for the right in India has come from multiple and often contradictory sources. The proprietorship of Hindutva does not, for instance, belong to Veer Savarkar, although his contribution is seminal. The Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh, RSS, too deserves serious attention, not merely for the influence it exercises on the BJP leadership, but for its approach to the larger question of national regeneration. Equally important is the influence of individuals such as Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay, Swami Vivekananda, and Sri Aurobindo, not to mention the Arya Samaj movement. This collection is an attempt to showcase the phenomenon of Hindu nationalism from a sympathetic position. I believe it is important to understand the phenomenon not only from the perspective of its critics, but also in terms of how it perceives itself. There has, for example, been an accusation that Hindu nationalism is singularly detached from the freedom struggle. I have tried to show that many of the concerns that drive the Indian right are located in the country's nationalist culture, particularly at a time when it wasn't politically incorrect to use the expression Hindu. Equally, the smug contention that the impulses driving the BJP are based on the rantings of provincial pamphleteers and outlandish conspiracy theories has been contested. The Ayodhya movement in particular went far beyond the rabble-rousing speeches of sadhus and sadhvis and put the political Hindu in focus. It also touched on India's reading of its own history, a revisionism that had its roots in pre-Marxist historiography. In the course of the introductory essay and the collection of readings that accompany it, I have attempted to locate some of the ideas, attitudes, and beliefs that define the Indian right. I have also sought to identify the nature of Indian conservatism and identify its similarities and differences with political thought in the West. The emphasis hasn't always been on the Modi appeal, which also incorporates issues of governance that are shaped more by pragmatic and managerial concerns than by ideology, but on the themes that motivate and drive the BJP core. This book is not about Hindu nationalism in power, but as a social and political movement, I hope it will encourage a more informed understanding of a phenomenon that will remain relevant in Indian life far beyond victories and defeats in elections. Swapan Dasgupta, New Delhi, March 2019. Chapter 1. The Political Context. Till the turn of the century, the counting of votes in an Indian general election was a prolonged 3-day affair. Since the electronic voting machines, EVM, were introduced nationally, the tense wait for an outcome has been reduced to barely 3 or 4 hours. On the morning of 16th of May 2014, it was clear to most Indians that the United Progressive Alliance, UPA, headed by the Congress that had governed the country since May 2004, was staring at certain defeat. In constituency after constituency, there were reports of listless Congress campaigns and a mood of demoralization among supporters of a party that had governed India for the most part since independence in 1947. The dejection in the ranks of the Congress owed to 2 factors. First, over the past 18 months or so, the UPA government had been relentlessly hammered on account of corruption scandals. Whether it was the allotment of leases for coal mining, the mismanagement of the Commonwealth Games in Delhi, or the auction of spectrum for the telecommunications industry, the government had been dogged by grave charges of pilferage and cronyism. The government was further shaken by a movement against corruption led by Anna Hazare, a venerable Gandhian from Maharashtra. Prime Minister Manmohan Singh was a respected economist who, as finance minister in the government headed by P.V. Narasimha Rao, had boldly departed from the decrepit license permit quota Raj and ushered a period of high economic growth. But he was also viewed as an ineffective and weak leader, unable to resist pressures from venal coalition partners and manage conflicting pulls within his own Congress party. Secondly, the Congress had always banked on a member of the Nehru-Gandhi family to both keep the fractious organization together and secure votes. Ever since Indira Gandhi transformed it into an appendage of her family in 1969, the principle of dynastic loyalty had come to define the party that had led the freedom struggle against British rule. For the 2014 election, the Congress pinned its hopes on Rahul Gandhi, the son of Rajiv and Sonia Gandhi, and the grandson of Indira Gandhi. Although Rahul had entered parliament in 2004, winning his father's old parliamentary seat of Amethi in Uttar Pradesh, his involvement in politics was never wholehearted. In a country where political leadership involved a daily commitment, no holidays, and unending engagement with party workers at all.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?